Welcome to the Layman Seminary. We're continuing our series on Bible study methods. This is not a Filipina edition, as we see the Filipinas are not with us at this moment. But I wanted to make a video, probably a shorter video. Focus on that method or that step in the method. Christ, and who's also involved in ministry with me. And he's been applying some of the things that have been mentioned in the videos. And so that made me think about, okay, well, I need to dial things back a moment. In my last video, one thing that we talked about was the Bible art categories. And I basically, the outcome of that video is where it helped expose us to the similar terminologies that are used in other methods and stuff. Some of the categories do not necessarily transfer over. In other words, there's some concepts there that don't function the same way, and I guess that's to be understood because Bible arcing is not the same thing as phrasing, and phrasing is unique in itself. And we'll go in more detail about that more advanced stuff. But if you remember, before I ever even introduced those Bible benefit, I'm actually with the categories and stuff on it. And one particular source is a book called Biblical Greek Exegesis. It's a purple book. I'll go ahead and pull it up on my Logos so that y'all can see the cover of it. I don't recommend anybody getting it unless they already know the language. But like I said, these tags, they are they're helpful regardless of whatever level you're at. So I'm pulling it up right now. I'm going to share my screen at this moment. I didn't share it in the beginning because I was trying to avoid the kaleidoscope effect. So here we are. Okay, present to everyone. So this is the book that I get these categories from. And so I have found these categories helpful. Here's a output basically I've done from there where they're mentioned, the list of semantic functions. Don't get tripped up on the word semantic. It just means meaning, a word meaning basically. So you have these things called foundational expressions, which is what this video is going to be about. And the ones that they mention are assertion, event, action, rhetorical question, desire, wish, hope, exclamation, exhortation, warning, promise, problem resolution, and entreaty. Now, I don't prefer to take a list of categories and then find them whenever I'm reading a text because to me it just seems mechanical. Rather, what I like to do is I like to go through a list and put my own labels. And of course, some of the labels that come to my mind are going to be from the other resources I read. But I try to do my best to stick with these labels whenever I did this next exercise. So let me blow this up to make it, well, actually, since no one else has to read it, I'll make it a little bit bigger. All right. So all I did was every time I see submit therefore to God or a command, because right here in this list for exhortation, they have command / to encourage. And I've always viewed exhortation as different than a command because in Greek, there's a specific mood that is often used for exhortation. But I understand the principle that a command is an exhortation. You're trying to motivate them to a certain behavior or an attitude. Okay, I'm all right with that. So anyway, I went through and I labeled all the exhortations. Then I went through and I saw some others, like for example, resist therefore to God. Submit therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. That's a promise. That's one of the categories that is mentioned up there. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. There's another promise. Exhortation, cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify you hearts, you double-minded. Be miserable and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord. And here's another promise, and he will exalt you. Exhortation begins. Do not speak against one another, brethren. Okay, now this section right here starts functioning more like a warning by assertion. Assertion is whenever you say that something is or is like or whatever. So he who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge of it. Okay. So continuing, here's an assertion. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and to destroy. Again, the warning continues with a rhetorical question here. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Assertion. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. And then here's the warning. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are like a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Then you have an exhortation. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. Here's the warning. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Therefore, to the one who knows to do the right thing and does not do it, to him it's a sin. See how these categories are helpful whenever you're thinking about how is this sentence or clause or phrase or whatever functioning. Usually these are going to be independent sentences or clauses, I think, the way the book explains it. But so this is what I did. I kind of just looked at this and like, okay, I can definitely see tons of exhortations by ways of command here with a few promises sprinkled in. And then right here, I looking at basically two main emphasis here. Verses 7 through 11 gives 9 exhortations by ways of command that include 3 resultant promises that are dependent on the condition of the commands being met. So even though these are commands, there's a promise here. And so the idea is that when you obey the command, God will fulfill the promise. Verse 11 through 17 gives 4 warnings by way of assertion that include an exhortation to take an alternative approach. And so you can see all the warnings, but the assertion concerning the alternative approach is where it says, where is it? Instead, you ought to say, right here, 15. Instead, you ought to say. So it's saying instead of having this attitude of dependency, you ought to say that. Okay, so we come right here and we see that I go into verse 11 a little bit more in detail. I said it points out the problem with speaking against a brother because it speaks against the Mosaic law for that mentions brotherly love. Rather than this type of judgment being proper application, it's the opposite. In other words, this is the idea here that a lot of times self-righteous people will bring judgments against somebody and they think that they're actually obeying the word of God, but actually they're speaking against the word of God. Now, that's not saying that there's not a proper time for judgment and all of that, but I'm just dealing with what this passage is speaking about as the application, because what James is pulling from is the Mosaic law. Not saying the Mosaic law was still in effect, but the principle of brotherly love obviously was in still effect. Okay, so we come down through here, and verse 12 mentions the solution. And so this is, if you go through here, you'll also see a problem resolution concept. And so you start thinking of it like that. You mentioned a problem of speaking against a brother. And so we talk about that. But the solution that's implied or just hinted at is that it talks about the judge coming. There is only one lawgiver and judge. The one is able to save and to destroy. And so I just put right here, mentions the solution to unjust judging is to recognize the true lawgiver and judge who has the ability to bring about 2 different outcomes. Okay, so we see how these categories help us make our descriptive summaries. And we're not dealing with all the other things that are mentioned. And we've already talked about in other videos about uh, the conjunctions and prepositions and their labels and all of that stuff that could be evolved there. Here we're just focusing on these foundational expressions. And these are very helpful because whenever you're reading the text, you can start out, well, Paul gives a command here, or of course we're reading James here, but Paul came to my mind as an example. So you're able to tell somebody about what the text is doing before you go into the details. So in 13 through 17, it says he addresses the attitude of the audience that is independent of recognizing God's will. They're making plans without thinking about God or thinking about how short their life is. The right thing that's mentioned here, this is observation, is not. I don't think it's just talking about you saying I would, if the Lord wills and all of that, that's the right thing. I think it's referring to all of this relates to the right thing. And that may not be right, but I mean, that's where I'm at the observation point. The right thing includes this and what came before, and to neglect to do the right thing is considered sin. So from this, we can see that this helps you trace the flow and the function of the passage. There's so much more that you can do. I'm going to continue making videos as it relates to this because it's going to cause me to probe the text a little bit deeper. And then I actually have to deliver my message or my teaching tomorrow at Sunday school, as well as this brother. He's going to be delivering it in a couple weeks. So hopefully these videos are helpful for people who are wanting to understand the passage and to be able to pick words that describe the force of a particular sentence or clause. And at the same time, this may help in you sharing your faith with others, Sunday school lessons, things like that. So that's it. So if this was helpful to you, be sure that you keep this ministry in prayer because we just need that a whole lot. But subscribe, hit the bell if you want notifications, give us a thumbs up, and let us know what you think. So with that, I say, God bless.